Happy April Fool's Day, everybody. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. I'm gonna first just make sure we clear something up here. Attendance. Um, on Mondays, I take attendance based on who's physically in the room. On Wednesdays, I don't take attendance because, well, we're just all online, and I post the video so those that aren't able to attend are able to watch it later. The way things work here is this is a hybrid course, and attendance is taken on the day when we have an on-campus lecture. That's for our international students so that they're able to meet the attendance requirements for the visa. So if you are an international student and you have not been showing up on Mondays physically in person here, you need to make sure you start doing that, okay? Because that can affect things with your visa and stuff like that. And I don't want to see that happen. Um, Other than that, that's about it. And if you notice any issues with the attendance record or your grades in general, feel free to reach out to me. I am definitely I definitely have an open door policy, so you can definitely say, hey, I don't think this grade is right. Could you take a look at it? And I'll gladly do that. Um, Sometimes it's a mistake I made, and sometimes it's literally points that you lost. When in that case, I'm able to explain that to you. But if it's a mistake, then I'll apologize and I'll give you those points back. You earned them. So don't hesitate reaching out to me. Let's go ahead and get started in today's lecture. This is not week 11. Why is it saying 11? This is week 12, right? Yeah. Oh, I remember why. I had to update 16 weeks. This is week 4. I had to update a slides for a 16-week course, and I had to compress them down for this 8-week course. And not all the title slides got converted. So I apologize. This is actually week 4. So I'm actually awake now. Let me get this Zoom window moved so I can see what's going on. There we go. We're gonna back up. To start this lecture on diversity and ethics today, I really want to take a brief detour into entrepreneurship, and I got a reason for this, okay? Entrepreneurship has a lot to do with leadership styles, organizational structure, and organizational climate, thus, diversity and ethics. They're really essential in talking about these aspects of organizations. And entrepreneurship is a great way to start because leadership styles and entrepreneurship can really either be really successful or fail or be successful for a while and then fail. And so they're kind of a nuanced, it's a really strange type of business. And people love to start businesses, but it's a lot more complex than they think. And it's a great way for me to show you diversity and ethics in an organization. Remember that diversity has a lot to do with doing the right thing because it's the right thing. That's ethics. Some leadership styles, like servant leadership, humble leadership, or transformational leadership, encourage diversity, while others, such as authoritarian leadership, charismatic leadership, dictatorial leadership, or transactional leadership, they're not readily given to diversity. You can apply diversity in those leadership styles, but they're not really built for that automatically, whereas the first set I listed there really are. And so you'll learn more about these as you get into like organizational behavior courses and stuff like that. But I'm going to give you a quick introduction into some of that today as we discuss diversity and ethics. Entrepreneurship provides the opportunity for a new company to be founded. There was no company. An entrepreneur says, we're going to do a startup. He gets his team together, or she gets his team or her team together, and they start the company. The risk of failure is high doing this. It's very high. A lot of companies that are startups, so a lot of startups end up failing, or they are successful and they wind up getting bought out by an established brand. Byers and Stanbury cited Patrick Henry, not the revolutionary figure from back in the 1700s, but this is a consultant named Patrick Henry. And he says the risk of failure for entrepreneurships is at 75%. So 3/4 of new startups fail. Another source places the rate at about 50%, or that's right, 50% after 5 years and over 70% after 10 years. And so that second source, that second study, looked at startups within a 5 year window, and 50% of them were closing. They then looked at the 10-year window, and they saw that 70% had been shut down. And so this tells us a lot. These new startups it's really hard to get them going. It's like trying to plant wheat on soil that is hard as rock. It's really difficult. You got to plow it, you got to put the fertilizer, you got to water it, you got to nurture it for plants to grow. The same thing is true in business. If you don't put the effort in and you're on really hard soil with the market and things like that, it's going to be difficult to be successful. Now, another pitfall here that Byers and Stanbury pointed out, that ethical failure is another one of the major dangers that entrepreneurs really have to try to avoid. And this can occur when leaders fall victim to their ego and let their hubris get in the way of ethical decision making. And this really comes down to I know best. I have a team made up of those represented here in this Zoom class, Adam and Noah and Howie and Simba. And my team, you're advising me because you're a good team and you're doing constructive dissent. You're saying, no, this is a bad idea. You shouldn't do that. But I go, nope, I overrule you. And I say, I know best. I'm the brains of the operation. And this is what we're going to do. That's a problem. That's a pitfall because I'm not listening to the very people I surround myself with. Now, if I've chosen my team properly, I've vetted each of you and I made sure that you're experts in your field. I made sure that you are proficient and you have experience and that you have the drive and motivation to work with me in this startup. And so I should have already made sure that you bring to the table things that I might be missing. So Adam might be an expert in software development. Well, Noah is a marketing genius. And Howie, he's excellent when it comes to operations. And Simba, he is like the top of the game when it comes to human resources. Now, I bring you together because I'm good at understanding leadership and organizational strategy and things like that. But I'm not the world's best when it comes to any of these topics, really. I probably could do better with human resources and operations, but when it comes to software development and things like that, I am going to flat out fail. But even there, I'm not specialized in human resources. Okay, so I'm going to have a problem when it comes to making some decisions. So I should listen to you. I should present things and say, we need to make a decision. This is what I'm thinking. What do you think? You give me your feedback, and I actually listen to you. But this pitfall would be me stopping my ears and saying, no, I know best. Now, another version of this pitfall is that I've surrounded myself with three of you, Adam, Noah, and Howie, and you all are basically just like me. And you are just right in there with consensus. You are in the same track of mind as me, and you're just as stubborn as I am, and you're coming along and you're supporting everything I do. Simba is the only one that's using his logical brain in this case, and he is contesting. He says, no, this isn't the way it's supposed to be. He's trying to do constructive dissent, but we keep shutting him down. Now what happens is we wind up pushing him into a category of being over here. You're one of the others because you're trying to disturb what we're trying to do. You're full of dissension. You're a troublemaker. And Simba, we're not going to listen to you. Well, the problem is we should be listening to him because he's the one that's not just raising his hand saying, yes, let's do that because everyone else is saying that. He's the one saying, wait, there's a problem. And so that's the other way this can manifest is I've surrounded myself with people that just agree with me. I don't want that. Personally, I want people that will disagree with me because that is going to make us better. That's going to make us stronger. Okay. But it has to be in a constructive way. And in this analogy, Simba, he's actually got in his heart, he wants this done for the right reason. He sees how this can be successful. He sees that people's incomes are at stake, the people that we're going to be employing or we've already employed and their families. He sees how there's a greater impact. And that's called the second and third order effects. And so when you look at a system, the first order effects, that's what we're thinking of right in the moment, the immediate what's happening. The second and third order effects, those are the outcomes and consequences that come down the road, maybe days, months, years down the road. And he's concerned about the moment, but he's really concerned about what's going to lead us to, or is this sustainable? In this case, in this instance, this analogy, Simba is the one that we should be listening to. But he, in this example, is the very one we're shutting out of our ears because he's not agreeing with us. So if we only want people to agree with us, we're going to have problems. And now Byers and Stanbury, they cite Uber as an example. And I hope you guys don't mind. I like to use you as actual examples, and I'm not picking on anyone. I hope you understand that. If you ever feel that way, please let me know, and I'll instantly stop. Byers and Stanbury, they cite Uber as an example. And that's a very interesting story here about Kalanick. He was the entrepreneur who started Uber. The corporate culture at the main office seemed to welcome misogyny, homophobia, and sexual harassment. Well, that's going to be a problem because when we start welcoming those very things in, we are being unethical. We're not being diverse. We're not being inclusive. We're not being equitable. We're being problematic. The authors continue to discuss how the senior leadership permitted and engaged in this negative behavior. And that would be the CEO, Travis Kalanick. He was ultimately forced to resign. Now, there was a good reason why they forced him to resign, because he was where the very problem came from. He was the one that was being misogynistic and homophobic and was doing sexual harassment and things like that, committing that. And when other people, the other leaders around him, so his leadership team saw this, a number of them started doing these because it was the company culture. The corporate culture was to be horrible. And that was a problem because now people are getting hurt. People are put in positions they shouldn't be put into. And ultimately, he was kicked out, and the company was able to regain its footing, and they were able to deal with these problems in a way that allowed for them to be sustainable. They dealt with these issues and they went forward from there. Now, Kalanick, he was a bit more what you would consider, or at least I would consider, my brain just went out of me. This happens when you get old. This is what you have to look forward to. He was very charismatic. He was a charismatic leader. A charismatic leader can easily get people excited about something. They can easily just want to join up and do this and that. And you look at charismatic figures. Now, we're going to go to my other specialty here. As a theologian, you may have heard of a man named Jim Jones. Well, he was a minister and he was very charismatic. And I don't mean that in the doctrinal way. I mean that in the leadership way. He was very passionate and people they got excited when he talked and he got them moving and motivated. Well, his charismatic leadership led to hundreds of people drinking cyanide laced Kool-Aid, or actually it was Flavor Aid was the actual brand. And they committed mass suicide at his command. So there's a problem with charismatic leadership. There are aspects of charismatic leadership that are positive and very useful and good. But when that's all we focus on, you're going to cause greater problems in the second and third order effect zone. Okay, so I'm going to continue with my notes here. The textbook stated, holding destructive egos in check is an ethical challenge at many successful businesses, particularly at hard-writing startups. So when you're starting up a business, it takes a lot of hours and a lot of dedication. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, if I'm going to do a startup, I'm going to be motivated. I'm going to be gung-ho. I'm going to sleep in the office from time to time. I'm going to work 12, 14-hour days. But the second I start expecting you to do that also, and I make it mandatory, I'm creating a negative environment. Now, if in our organization here, we're the board of directors, I'm the CEO, Noah says, I really believe in this. And he willingly starts putting in extra hours. He willingly, from time to time, winds up sleeping in his office. I have done nothing to tell him he has to do that. I have not tried to make it mandatory. I have not dictated it. I've never even told him he should think about it. That's different. He believes in this and he's giving more into it of his own volition, his own free will. Whereas Adam, Howie, and Simba, they're like, we got families. We want to go home to our families at night. No problem. In a healthy startup, I can be gung ho. Noah can be gung ho. And the rest of you, you can work the normal hours and go home. That's fine. But while you're here, you're going to be working hard. But after that, you have to go home. Now, there is another person I'm going to talk about briefly. His name is Elon Musk. Elon Musk, well, he's extremely wealthy, as we all know. And we like to think he's very successful. And in some ways, he is. But he's successful because of all the failures he's had. The more successful you are, the more failures you've actually gone through. And you realize it's not about staying down, it's about standing up after you get hit down. With Elon Musk, he is so driven and so charismatic as a leader and so focused that he winds up getting right in the middle. So back to our little example, Adam says, hey, we have a problem with this thing in the software. What would Elon would get right in there and he would start coding. He'd take over Adam's keyboard. He would be right there and doing all the work. He'd be looking over, micromanaging Adam as Adam's trying to program, and really creates this weird, tense environment. And then Elon would just stay there until it's all finished. And by that time, it's too late to go home. Now he has to stay the night. And Adam, he doesn't get to go home either. Now, this is a problem because Adam would have been hired to do a job, but the CEO is not letting him do it. Elon is notorious for this. He's also notorious for mandating that people are going to be working long extra hours and that they had better plan just to sleep there in their office from time to time. That's expected. That's the company culture. And to me, that's quite toxic because now I'm abusing my staff and my employees. So Elon Musk, while he is a person we can talk about some positive things about, there's the negative we got to bring up also. And you're going to find that with everybody in leadership. Some are very positive in a lot of ways, but they have a few negatives. Some are very negative in many ways, but have a few positives. And it's up to us in academia, really to use critical thinking skills and sort those out and figure out where are the things that we can keep and use and where are the things that we need to avoid and see as pitfalls. So corporate culture starts at the very beginning of a startup, of any business. Whenever you start a business, the company culture begins then. Now, with Uber, when Kalanick resigned, the company culture did change. That means the company personality changed. Some, not all. Because once a company gets its identity as a type of individual, it really retains a lot of that historically. There are changes that happen, but a lot of the structure, it's kind of like the human body, the skeleton, it's still there. You can go to the gym, you can work out, you can lose weight, build muscle, but your skeletal system is still there. Okay, now, granted, the bones have gotten thicker and they've gotten more durable because of all the exercise, but you still have a skeleton. Okay, in business, it's the same way. The personal identity that organizations have, that organizational identity, most of it really does remain intact in a lot of ways. Over the years, as the staff changes, some things, some attributes might shift and change, but overall it stays fairly consistent. In the case of Uber, they were able to exercise and get out the negative, and they were able to keep the positive. And that was a very good thing in my opinion. Byers and Stanbury noted that many founders can become superstars, like Steve Jobs. However, this can lead to the founders to act out as they always wanted to, but they weren't able to. So if you're seen as a superstar, you can get away with a lot. In the case of Kalanick, he was seen as a superstar. He was able to be misogynistic and engage in sexual harassment, and he was able to get away with it because people just saw him as a superstar. Think about some performer that you really like, some music entertainer. If me, it'd be a rock and roller. And I think about this person, and let's just say Ozzy Osbourne. Okay, I like Ozzy's music. Yeah, he passed away, but I really enjoyed his music, his work. But he was treated like a rock star because he was, and he got away with a lot of stuff that no one would get away with. Now, we have to be careful about that because as leaders, if we begin to act that way, People around us are going to see us as being toxic, and that's really a problem. It is important to note that many successful entrepreneurs fail many times before they finally succeed. And this can give people the false perception that success is easy when it never is. So pick anyone out there that you think as an entrepreneur or that started up a company that just you think that they did amazing and they're really super intelligent. Well, they probably are really intelligent, but look and find out how many times they failed before they succeeded. Because we as human beings, we learn a lot through failure. We learn more through failure than we do through success. And so if someone really is successful, they've probably failed a lot of times before in order to become that successful. Personality and entrepreneurship. A special kind of person becomes a successful entrepreneur. They must be able to handle immense stress and endure personal hardship. There's always a financial and personal cost to founding a startup, as noted in your textbook. Many startups suspend part of their humanity while founding the company just to endure that hardship, but this costs the firm later in the future. Okay? They lose their ethical compass in the process. They get so wrapped up into being so hyper-focused about this startup that they actually lose their ethical compass. So what you see happen in a lot of cases with startups, the original founder spends a couple years there, gets it really going, makes it into something that really does become successful. And then as the company adds more to its size, it grows in its employee base, its customer base, its profit margin, it's always really, really helpful for that particular leader to quit, to be replaced. So a person who is a leader that is more traditional in how they lead can come in, because a startup has to be very agile. So the leadership structure typically is very flat. You're able to make decisions quickly. You can react to market changes quickly. You can react to issues quickly, and it needs to be that way. But once you start becoming a larger company, you need the bureaucracy. You need that stability, because the bureaucracy does bring stability with it. And so by bringing in another leader who is more bureaucratic and traditional in how they lead, the company can grow. Without that, the company is actually going to more than likely fail. And so you need to see that change in leadership. Will you be the person you want to be at the end? Achieving success as an entrepreneur can cost you the very humanity you had at the beginning. Founders must fully understand this at the beginning and decide if it is worth it, if it is worth the cost, or if they should install safeguards to protect themselves from this. Decisions must be made in rapid succession at the beginning, but then, after the company has been established, bureaucracy begins to take root, thus slowing down the decision-making process. Startups eventually become what they were avoiding in the beginning. Most startups want to avoid being the standard traditional company with a layered hierarchy that has a bureaucratic process and policies and standard operating procedures, but that's what you have to become. Once you get your foundation, you need to develop that part of the organization. Byers and Stanbury pointed out that as more levels of management are added to the organizational structure, the more formalized and traditional the organization becomes. This is also caused by the addition of more procedures, even though they are necessary for the operation of the company. So more procedures. We start off, we only need a couple key leaders, and they can do the hiring company-wide. They can make a lot of the decisions company-wide. But once we really start getting bigger and we got more output that we're putting out into the marketplace, and we have more employees working for us, a few leaders can't do it all. So we got to bring in somebody to run the finances. So we bring in a CFO. We bring in somebody who is going to head up the human resources department, the chief people officer. Okay. We're going to bring in somebody to head up operations, a COO. We're going to bring these people in, and we're starting building up that bureaucracy. We need the policies. We need the people. Now we grow even more, and our chief people officer has to hire more leaders under them to be able to do all the work, to manage all the personnel. So as we grow, we literally have to grow our structure at the same time. We're not going to start with a fully developed organizational structure. We're going to start small and flat, but as we grow, we have to add to it. We have to understand that at the beginning. This process was predicted by the German academic Max Weber in a book published in 1925 after his death. Basically, he predicted that agile startups would be ripe for bureaucratization as they grow and age. Byers and Stanbury pointed out that most entrepreneurial leaders have to be very charismatic, but charisma leads to inflated egos. This means that the approach to leadership must change as the company grows in size and age. Demanding leaders tend to push productive employees away, and new employees find the work environment undesirable. The charismatic leader who founded the company becomes a major part of the organizational story and lore, and that organizational story is essential for that company. If you look at a company that's been around for a really long time, let's say IBM, they have an organizational story. It goes all the way back to their founding. It really serves as a backbone for the company culture in a lot of ways. But the leader, even though the founder was quintessential in the story, he's not the main character. The point I'm trying to make is that position of main character changes as the organization grows, develops, and ages. This can create the good old days mentality inside that company. Okay, so if you don't know what that is, it's 2026. You come to work for me. Simba just started working for me. Howie's been working for me for 20 years. Adam's been around for 10 years. And Noah, he's been around for 5. The good old days is back 10 to 20 years ago when Adam, Howie, and I started the company and we put in the hard work and we saw good success and we were running it in a certain way. Now, that way worked at that time, but we had to evolve over time to the point where we are now. And now we got more layers of leadership. But we sit around and we talk about the good old days and we want to go back to them. But the problem is, if we did, we would literally push the new people out. We would literally cause them problems. And we would ultimately destroy our company. As the leadership style changes due to the increasing size and age of the company, many remember back to the good old days and attempt to cling on to that status quo, according to Clark in his 2020 book. And that status quo is the old way we did things, the old way of operating, the old policies, the old procedures, the old mentality. So when we hear in society people talking about the good old days, they might be referring to the 1980s. Now, the 1980s, I was a teenager in that decade. We had a big problem across the whole country with cocaine. We had a big problem. AIDS epidemic really impacted the country. There was a lot of kind of crazy lifestyle in the 80s. People were real carefree, spent a lot of money. That's not necessarily going to work today. But by looking back to the old days, that's what we might be looking at. But what if we're looking back to the 1950s, 1960s as the good old days? Well, that was under Jim Crow. And that's where we still had segregation. That's where we still had we have race problems now, but we had even more back then. Okay, so the good old days, that's not where the solution is at. The solution is here and now. We got to let it emerge and manifest itself by learning the lessons from the past and not repeating the mistakes and allowing something new to happen. Entrepreneurial leaders tend to work very long hours and expect their staff to do the same. But this mentality does not work in a company that has grown and aged. When the entrepreneurial mindset clashes with the more traditional organizational approach, there can be hurt feelings on both sides. You'll find that in your textbook. While this can be catastrophic for employees, it can be devastating to customers and clients. And I'm going to add in there, this is a Dr. G addition, the families of your employees are going to be really impacted negatively also. The promise made to the customers and clients being broken, trust is shattered, and the reputation is ruined. And in business, when you ruin your reputation, it is hard to get it back. Sometimes it's virtually impossible. Business ethics have changed in this case. We've seen business ethics changing. The business ethics of the 50s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s are much different than they are now. Advertising and social media. So there was a time when social media did not exist. I remember it plain and clear. But we live in a time when social media seems to control much of our daily lives. Has social media affected business ethics regarding advertising? That's going to be an interesting topic. According to Kelly Jensen, this is called the digital era. She also stated, the internet is arguably the single most influential factor of our culture, transforming the way we view communication, relationships, and even ourselves. Social media platforms have evolved to symbolize the status of both individuals and businesses alike. Today, using social media to create brand awareness, drive revenue, engage customers, and attract new ones isn't optional anymore. Now it is an absolute must. So issues revolving around data leaks and breaches of customer information really plague a lot of organizations. What can a company do to protect against this particular series of problems? They have to use social media if they want to attract new customers and to retain old ones, but at what cost? Does this maybe create an environment where customers purchase items simply because they see them on social media instead of really needing them? How many times have you been on social media and you see an advertisement and you're like, ooh, I want to get that? We all have felt that. How many times have you actually pulled the trigger and bought it? I think we probably all have done that too. That right there is very impulsive. We didn't stop and give ourselves a chance really to think about it. Do we really need this? Or can I be okay without it? I try to give myself a little window. When I see something in an advertisement and I really like it, I wait a little bit. I mull it over. I think about it. I live my life without it. And then I return back to thinking about getting it. And if I still want it then, if I can convince myself that I really would benefit from it, I'll go ahead and do it. Or maybe I convince myself it's something I personally just really would like to have. I'll do it. But I let myself have the opportunity to critically think about it. Now, social media and the customer. Your textbook asked a very pertinent question that was first asked by John Kenneth Galbraith, and I quote here, is it possible for a sophisticated advertising campaign to create a demand for a product whose benefits are frivolous at best? Yes, it is. That's known as the dependency effect. How many companies have begun to manipulate customers into buying things they do not really need? I'm going to say most of them. Is this ethical? How can an organization encourage diversity given the nature of advertising and social media? Really think about that. If we're using social media and trying to be ethical, are we needing to spend more effort to make sure that we're also being diverse, or does social media help us in being more diverse? And this really comes out to how we use social media as a company. If we're using it to advertise, and we're going to be talking about targeted advertisements here in a little bit, and we're going to look at some of the ethicality around that. And I think that's really something important we have to think about as the modern business world and manufacturing and retail continues to go through growth through the years and the decades before us, in front of us. There is a lot of psychology in advertising. Advertising has always relied on psychological appeals, meaning the company uses advertising to reach our self-esteem and persuade us that we feel better about ourselves if we use certain products. That's a quote from your textbook. Psychological appeals normally contradict sound ethics. The generational differences in advertising. Each generation perceives necessities and luxuries differently. Okay, my generation, I see a place to live, a vehicle. I see food. I see utilities, paying my bills. I see having credit cards as a necessity. My mom in her generation would have seen many of those same things as necessities, except the credit cards. And so, really, things do change by generation. My generation saw other things as being a little bit more important and more of a necessity. Many advertising professionals study these and exploit them for the benefit of the companies they work for. Legally, as long as the advertisers do not violate the law, they suffer no legal repercussions. In other words, as an advertiser, you can be unethical as long as you're not being illegal. But are they violating sound business ethics? In many ways, I think they are. But since it's not illegal, they do it. But should they do it? I don't think they should. Does this amount of pressure that's being placed on the consumer indicate the ethicality of the advertisement? I'm going to say the more pressure you feel in an advertisement, the more you feel pressured to buy this product or service, it's becoming more or less and less and less ethical. So as a customer begins to feel more and more pressure, the company is being more unethical. Let's look at the age of the target audience, and let's see if that matters. Byers and Stanbury pointed out that children are often subjected to more advertisements than adults due to the amount of TV and internet that they're exposed to, combined with the English can be so hard, susceptibility of their age. Okay, so a child they're in their formative years. I don't know if you know this about human growth and development, but the human brain does not fully finish developing, particularly the frontal lobe, until we get around age 25. Okay. Now, the frontal lobe is essential for things like critical thinking, logic, reason. So if we're, as a company, using advertisements that specifically target children, we're targeting people that haven't been able to mature to a point where they can use critical thinking, where they can use logic and reason. So what are we doing? We're playing on their emotions. It's an appeal to emotion. Do ads targeted towards children affect them later as adults? Absolutely. I can think back to as a child, the advertisements I might see on TV or in magazines or catalogs, because we used to use catalogs a lot. That was like the internet before we had the internet. And certain things really stuck out to me. And to this day, I still am drawn to those things. So yeah, it imprinted on my psyche in such a profound way that to this day, I'm still influenced by that. Should that be regulated? I would think we shouldn't have to regulate that. We should all be wanting to do the right and ethical thing. But since we know many people are not wanting to be ethical, they want to increase their profit, increase their wealth at any cost, I think that we have to actually legislate a lot of this stuff in. I think we have to. When do adults become victims of persuasive advertisements? Well, if an adult is coerced through advertisement to spend money they don't have on something they don't need, to do something that they don't have to have done, I think we've treated them as a victim. Is it considered diversity to advertise to children? Because remember, part of being diverse is that we avoid ageism. I think that there is a way to advertise that might be received by children, but in a more ethical way. Think about toy advertisements. One, they usually happen during the hours when cartoons are playing. If you watch regular TV, and now that we're streaming, we don't have nearly as much of that. But when I was a kid and watching cartoons, all the toy advertisements happened during the cartoon time. And they show these toys and they make it seem like they're so cool. And as a kid, you think that's the best thing ever, and I gotta have that. So you're bugging your parents, bugging your parents. Well, my family was quite poor. I wasn't getting these toys. That just wasn't going to happen. I still wanted them. And I think it created in me an imbalance. It created this passion for something I couldn't have. And it was almost like jealousy, envy. And it does feel bad looking back. And the feeling it made me have inside, I don't think that these companies were right to make me have that feeling of jealousy and envy. I think we have to be very careful when it comes to advertising in a way that impacts children. We have to be very careful not to engage in the appeal to emotion. We have to be very careful to not coerce them, because what might be persuasive for an adult to hear could be coercive if the context is it's directed toward a child. And the difference is persuasion, typically, it's mostly positive, could be a little negative, but the intent isn't really bad. Whereas coercion, you literally want to take advantage of somebody. And in this case, you're taking advantage of the children's inability to engage in logic and reason, then to, with their emotion, bug their parents continually until they go buy the toy. And that's coercion. I think coercion is definitely a problem. I think it is a problem. Subliminal advertising. Byers and Stanbury, in your textbook, pointed out that children and the elderly are more susceptible to subliminal advertising. Now, subliminal advertising is you're watching a movie and halfway through in one frame, and we don't even register it. It happens so fast. One frame, so one image, boop, of a cold soda pops up on the screen. You're in the movie theater, boop, and 5 minutes later, a popcorn, boop, a thing of popcorn pops up. And we don't literally see it, but it happens so fast, and subconsciously, we register that it's there. And we begin craving some soda, and we crave popcorn. So we go and we buy them from the concession stand. That's subliminal advertising. But science has yet to prove that subliminal messaging actually really, truly, 100% really does work. That hasn't stopped the movie directors and advertisers from trying to use it, though, because you see this. And if you were to do a YouTube search for movies with subliminal messaging, you're probably going to see a lot of images come up. There was a horror movie, and I want to say that it was The Exorcist. Yeah, it was. And when they did the original screenings of it, the soundtrack, they used soundtracks that they keyed in subconsciously to centers that of our brain that registers confusion and fear, and so like the amygdala and things like that. And they keyed in on that. And then they actually put in this image, a horrifying image for like one frame. And in some of the original showings, it was reported people were literally becoming physically ill. So I think subliminal messaging, while not yet truly scientifically proven, I think that one day we're going to prove a form of it does exist. So while subliminal advertising is not proven, persuasive and coercive advertising is a very real thing. Watch movies back from my time period and earlier. Okay. From the 1990s, I was a young adult, all the way back to the very first movies. You're going to see people doing this in the movies. And if you're not able to see, I'm holding my clicker like it's a cigarette. You see a lot of smoking in movies. That was really because the tobacco industry wanted more people to get addicted. And that was a very persuasive, coercive form of advertisement. And when that started showing up in movies targeted to teenagers and children, that was extremely coercive and unethical, because a lot of teenagers at my school smoked. We even had a official smoking area for seniors. High school seniors could go smoke. A high school senior could go buy cigarettes at the store. Now we know, and we knew then, but the tobacco industry really kept it suppressed through a lot of litigation. Smoking is bad for us. But back in the 40s and 50s, did you know that there were advertisements on TV for different brands of cigarettes where they would have somebody portraying a doctor saying, oh, studies show that Camel cigarettes are the #1 cigarettes smoked by doctors. And this person pretending to be a doctor would say, I recommend them to my patients for having a healthy lifestyle. Well, we now know that that caused cancer. There was nothing healthy about smoking cigarettes, but they were using this advertisement in a very unethical way. And the thing is the tobacco companies knew that it was causing cancer, but they were suppressing that information. Now, that is a real good example of unethical advertisement using persuasive and coercive advertising. Do we need a hamburger that has 1,885 calories? And I'm going somewhere with this. In Texas, and I don't know if they're elsewhere, but I know in Texas, there's a hamburger chain called Whataburger. And they have a triple meat Whataburger. And it has 1,885 calories, 84 grams of fat, 2,080 milligrams of sodium. That's according to Eat This, Not That. And that's what the site is called. Eat This, Not That. That is a horrible thing to be serving people for food. You're going to contribute to the obesity problem. You're going to contribute to hypertension. You're going to contribute to high blood pressure and high cholesterol. You're going to contribute to all these bad things, but they're selling this left and right. They're advertising it and they're wanting people to eat it. Now, I've lost 100 pounds. I used to be almost, I was 269. I was a pretty big guy. And I could put down some food. But I couldn't even imagine eating that entire burger. That was way too much food, even for me back in those days. So when we're selling this and we're advertising this stuff, we're promoting people actually harming themselves in the long term. That's not good. That's not ethical. Is this practice ethical? Well, I just answered that. I don't think it is. Is it focusing on diversity? Advertising to people who consume unhealthy amounts of calories. Well, we have to be careful there because if we are going to truly have diversity, we're going to accept somebody's body type for what it is. Okay. And that's just it. We're going to accept them for as they are. But as a company, I don't think it's good if we are promoting people to put harmful substances in their body, like, I don't know, all the substances that come off of a burning cigarette. And I'm a former smoker, and I'm not against people smoking, but I think you ought to be an adult and you ought to make that decision for yourself and understand what the consequences can be. I actually still, to this day, vape. I haven't had a cigarette in quite a while. The last one I had, I think I was doing my dissertation. That was stress, pure stress. Cigars, I haven't had cigars in the last couple of years. I'm not against them per se, but I'm against advertising in a way that coerces people or manipulates people into a place where they're doing this and they adopt that habit and then they get ill and I didn't know it was going to cause cancer. See, for many years, no one knew that the public, the customers, they didn't know that smoking caused cancer because the tobacco industry suppressed all these studies. These studies were out there. But through legal means and etc., they suppressed the studies. And then when the studies started coming out, the tobacco industry actually released fake studies saying that there's nothing harmful with smoking cigarettes. But all the executives of the tobacco companies knew that there was. And so all these lawsuits came out finally, and warning labels got put on cigarettes. The age to buy cigarettes moved up. So I think we really got to be careful because allowing for diversity doesn't mean we've got the right to put people in a situation where they're going to be dying later in their life because of our product. We have to be careful with that. That is the lecture for today. I wanted to take you through entrepreneurship because looking at how diversity and ethics play into startups can help us in understanding how they can play in bigger organizations. Are there any questions? All right. Well, for those who are not on the Zoom class right now, but we're watching this later, if you do have questions, send me an email. Make sure that you keep up with your working canvas and let me know. Send me an email if you have any questions, comments, or if you have ideas that you want to share on this subject. And I would appreciate that. You all have a great rest of your April Fool's Day. I hope that it's good for you and that you stay warm in this little bit of a cold snap. Should be warming back up soon. So that's about it. Thank you very much. I'll see a couple of you here in a minute. Noah and Simba, I'll see you in a few minutes at the next class. You have a good day, gentlemen.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.